Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we'll explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who have found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We'll unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. And we're back with another episode. So excited at where we are and this journey that we're all going on together. Who knew a year ago that I would be sitting here with a podcast microphone in my face, looking at a screen with one of my favorite people, and have the privilege and honor of being able to interview her and let her tell some stories about her experience with being on a comma and getting off the comma. So I have the privilege today to talk with Wendy Green, who also hails from my home state of California. And I am going to hand it over to you, Wendy, and ask you to introduce yourself and tell us how you would like to be known.
Hi, Paul. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Wendy Green, and Wendy is fine. I would describe myself as a curious, creative, and compassionate wanderer. I'm an explorer. I like to call myself a cultivator of community and connection because I find that everything that I'm doing seems to be doing one of those two things. I'm either trying to build community or I'm trying to find connection. And I'm a champion and a cheerleader. I like to support people when they're out there slaying their goals and doing great. I like to be there and let them know they have support and encouragement and all the love they need to get it done.
That is so cool. And I love I can certainly relate to the wanderer, the searcher seeker. And I know you use some different words, but that's really cool. And yes, I would say my experience with you has very much been that you are a cultivator and a connector and a cheerleader. So that's awesome. Again, I want to thank you for being here. And this is really kind of cool because this is a little bit of a role reversal for us in our current relationship, isn't it?
It is. That's true.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Wendy and I have been working together. She's been coaching me and has gotten to see a lot of the commas that I have sat on. And today I get the privilege of getting to hear some of her stories. And, as I always mention, we haven't talked about what the story is. I don't know what she's going to be sharing with us. And so I'm excited to hear about what you're going to be sharing with us today. So what is your intention for yourself from this conversation today, Wendy?
I think my intention is to just be really honest about what I have discovered for myself about the difference between sort of being stuck somewhere and intentionally taking a pause, or in my case, unintentionally taking a pause and deciding it was okay to be a pause. I have a lot of sort of revelations and thoughts about that mindset shift for me.
I love that because a lot of times, when we talk about sitting on a comma is associated with being stuck. And a lot of times when we think about being stuck, then the association is like feeling like it happened to you. And one of the greatest things that I've learned about sitting on a comma over these past couple of years is that there's a lot of value that can come from being there. And so this is really exciting to me to hear you talk about kind of intentionally taking the pause, sitting on a comma as a choice versus as an outcome or an accident, right?
Yes.
Yeah, very cool.
And I think, too, the other thing that was sort of powerful for me was this idea that I can sit on that comma. I can stay there. There is no compulsion to move off of it just because people move off of their comma. Like I can sit here and decide how long I want to stay, when I want to move. It's just a pause.
Yeah, it's just a pause. It sounds like a break, a rest, a respite, or an observational opportunity, right? Seems like a lot of different things come up.
All of those.
Okay. So your intention is to be honest and to kind of unpack and explore these nuances or distinctions between being stuck and pausing and taking pauses. My intention is first and foremost, to give you space to share your story and your experiences with us. And that in doing so, out there, someone listening to your story might see themselves in you and your experience and feel a little bit more connected, a little less alone, and maybe treat themselves a little bit lighter. Also, my intention is that in telling the story, it creates or does something for you that maybe you didn't anticipate or didn't foresee.
Can't wait.
All right. Well, as always, I have 5 questions that I'm going to take you through, and that'll be the framework of our conversation. Obviously, we'll dig in deeper and delve in deeper as you start to answer and respond to these questions. There may be times you get this. Obviously, we do this in our other calls with each other. There may be times where I kind of step in, interject or interrupt to, kind of dig a little deeper, or wait a minute, let's unpack that a little bit further if we can. And you know what I'm starting to discover this far into it is also there may be times where you've already answered the next question. So I'll be like, okay, I think you've already answered this, but I'm going to ask it again in case there's more you would add. So I had this vision when I started doing this of like, and I'm always going to be able to ask these questions, everything. And like, because this space is about allowing for the telling of the story, as I'm letting it unfold, sometimes it doesn't feel right to step in and interrupt. And so it's like, okay, well, just automatically went on to the next question. So guess what? I'm going to be okay with that.
Oh, and you can interrupt anytime. As you and I know, we tend to wander a little bit sometimes, and we're not going to be here for 8 hours. So we do need to stay a little bit focused. So I appreciate any intervening to keep me on track.
You didn't read the email? Where did you get the idea we weren't going to be here for 8 hours? Let's start with the first question, Wendy. So where have you found yourself sitting on a comma in your life?
This question has been so interesting to me. I think I shared with you when we were first talking about me coming on the podcast and what it might be for me to talk about sitting on a comma. I couldn't really come up with any examples of when I've been on a comma. And I think it's because I just never stopped. I was always working towards and for the next thing. What's the next job I'm going to get? What's the next promotion I'm going to get? What's the next board of directors I want to join? What's the next volunteer opportunity for me? And I find myself now at this present moment in my life sitting on a comma, and I've been here for a little while, and I'm not really in a hurry to get off of it right now, and to have that realization that I get to choose whether I stay here or not has been really powerful. So the situation I'm going to talk about with you today is how I got here in this comma and how it feels to stay here, and whether I'm going to move off of it or not. We'll see. I know that's a question. That's a question coming later. So we'll see what my answer is when you ask.
Yeah, but this is cool because I hear a couple of things in what you've shared. Now, what really jumped, off of the screen, we're looking at each other via screen at me, was I never thought of this because I never stopped. And then a little while ago, you had said, well, I'm taking this pause intentionally. So, I mean, may I ask, it seems like maybe this choosing to pause is actually giving yourself that opportunity to stop and think and reflect.
Yeah. So I think that I didn't choose the pause that I'm in initially. Mm-hmm. And that's the story I'm going to tell, like how I got here. And I struggled for a little while with how do I get out of this? How do I get off of this comma? What do I do next? And then I just suddenly realized I don't want to right now. I don't want to get off of this comma. This comma is doing me some good. It's serving me right now. And so I'm going to be okay with just sitting on it for a bit.
I love that. And it's different from some of the stories we've heard so far and some of the folks that I've talked to so far. And I think there's going to be so much value in this because of the perception that so many people have that they have to get unstuck because they see being stuck as only one thing. And it sounds like what you're going to be sharing with us is that it can be so many things.
Correct.
If you even want to call it being stuck, like you said, like it's really, this doesn't feel like being stuck for me.
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm stuck. Once I had that mindset shift where I realized it's not that I can't get off of this comma, it's that I don't want to. That that mindset shift was huge for me. So let me just give you some context about like who Wendy was when the story started.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll get a little bit more of an appreciation for who I am now, because there's been a big shift.
Mm.
So in 2017, that's where we start. And I won't take me 5 years to get through it, I promise. But in 2017, I was a people pleaser. I was anxiously attached to a man in my life. I was a single mother with 2 kids who were teenagers, entering kind of the worst part of the teen years, which is when they start flexing their independence and they start sort of telling you that they have their own thoughts. So I'm on this precipice, and my mother was not doing well physically. So had this amazing year with this man. We were both like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. It's so great. And at the end of 2017, my mom got put into a long-term rehabilitation facility. And her being stuck in there, talk about being stuck, right? Her being stuck in that facility brought up a lot of problems with our relationship. Like, I was her safe person. And so I got all the anger and I got all the frustration. And was and still am really, really sensitive. And my mom could particularly push my buttons. So I got my butt into therapy, and I'd been in therapy off and on for 30 years, but I went into therapy at the end of 2017 with this intention. And what I said to her the very first time we met was, please teach me how to have grace with my mother so that I don't say something to her and then she dies on me. And I spend the rest of my life regretting these words that came out of my mouth because I was hurt or frustrated or whatever it was. So that kind of started this journey that led to the pause that I'm on now. Fast forward a few months, March of 2018, I got really sick. To this day, we don't really know what happened. But March, April, May into June, I was seeing doctors and specialists and blood work. I ended up seeing a total of 12 doctors. I had 2 surgeries. It's this crazy thing. The best they know is I got some kind of bacteria and it just wreaked a bunch of havoc in my body. So anybody who's had health issues knows that's a really scary thing when you've never had health issues before. So June comes around, I'm coming up for air, and the relationship now is starting to get a little bit rocky, right? Because it's hard when your partner is sick, and it's scary when your partner is sick. And he was there and supported me, but I was starting to see some cracks in the relationship. My mother got in a very serious car accident in June. And because I was her person, I had to find a place for her to go. I had to find a live-in situation, all that kind of stuff. And meanwhile, I'm working full time. I'm a single mother of these 2 kids. And then my mom died in July and it was unexpected. And, anytime somebody in your family dies, regardless of what your role is in that family, it just sort of wreaks havoc on all the relationships and all kinds of things. And then we have our friend grief, right? Then
Sure.
our grief shows up, and grief, she's a bitch, man. She is a bitch. And so I'm navigating, through the summer of 2018. And then I got in a car accident that was very severe in the fall. And I went into the end of 2018, and I don't know if everybody else does this, but just like, God, I just want this year to end. Like, I am so tired. I just need it to end. I can't wait. 2019 is going to be so great. I can't wait. So we work our way through the holidays, and the relationship's a little bit rocky. January comes around, and I get a phone call from my kid's school that he is suicidal and engaging in some very scary behavior. So then the next 5 months, we're dealing with this child of mine who, was diagnosed with a depressive disorder, and we were in and out of psychiatrists and psychologists and counselors, and huge impact on our relationship, the mother-child relationship. And that had a reaction from the partner, right? So things are getting worse. The culmination in May of 2019, I woke up one day and I felt like I was having a heart attack or something. I felt like an elephant was sitting on my chest. I don't typically get panic attacks. I don't know if that's what it was, but a really weird thing happened. My mind shut down and I went somewhere else, and I don't really know where I went. 2.5 hours later, I snapped out of it, and I was in my car driving 45 minutes away from my home, and I had no idea why I was going there, where I was going. I had showered and dressed, don't remember doing that. Like, I had this moment where I lost like 2.5 hours, and I was functioning like a person.
Wow.
And it scared the crap out of me. I thought, okay, obviously I've had enough. Like, I can't do this anymore. So then I had an opportunity to take 6 weeks off. I took a leave of absence because I thought I need to go take care of myself. Like, something's going on. And I took this long road trip in Oregon. I drove from Sacramento all around the state of Oregon over like 8 days. And I cried the whole way. And I had 2 really amazing encounters with strangers during that time. And I had a really good therapy session sitting in a hot springs in Ashland, Oregon, on the phone with my therapist as I'm sitting in this, warm, bubbly water, which was amazing. And then in the fall, the partner and I break up. And so I was kind of like, the last 18 months of my life have just sucked. Like, there is no other way to describe it. And because I have kind of a dark sense of humor, I had hashtag 18-month shit show as like what I described to everybody. And so by the fall of 2019, I was beaten down. I was broken. I was exhausted, and I didn't know what to do. And I just remember I kept saying to myself, whatever it is you are doing right now, not working. It's not working. Like, you're not healing. You're not happy. You don't have these relationships with these people that you want to have. And I had this whole big thing. So one of many turning points was I reached out to our mutual friend, Cammie, to talk to her about her coach training. And at the time, I didn't know she had her training program that she has. I just knew she was a coach, and my intention was to find out where she got her training, how much did it cost, how long did it take. And so I invited her to meet me for coffee. We have coffee. I bawl and sob for an hour and a half. And she, God bless her, just sat there and listened. And then she told me about her coach training program. And a month later, I was enrolled and signed up for this coach training program that started in January of 2020. And at the time, I thought, this will be good. Like, this will give me something else to do, kind of distract me from my work and help me like learn more about myself and all of these sort of altruistic things that we have when we go into coach training, right? And then the pandemic hit. And for most people, the stay-at-home orders were a big bummer. But for me, because I was in such a broken place, I was so happy to be home. I didn't have well-meaning and well-intentioned friends trying to get me to go out. Let's go out and have some fun. Like, nobody was doing that. And I could just stay home and feel all of the things that I had not been feeling during the 18-month shit show. And so my mental health, I think, sort of pushed me into this pause that I'm in right now. I think, whatever happened in May of 2019 when I disappeared, that was some sort of, crack in the glass or something. I don't really know what it was. I mean, I've joked that it's like a mini nervous breakdown. I don't think that's really what it was, but
yeah. Well, and your mental health professional could certainly, give better diagnosis on that. But I want to take a moment just to acknowledge you because, even what you've shared so far, I mean, let's look at everything that you had to deal with and that was on your plate, right? You go from your mother having, a major health crisis and requiring, some short-term care. And then of course the dynamics of carrying not only supporting her through this, but also mentally and emotionally supporting her. And then the impact that had on you. Then, meanwhile, you're trying to carry this relationship and take care of yourself. And then there's your car accident, her car accident, your car accident. I'm not going in the right order here, but her health crisis, 2 car accidents, one for you, one for her. This just really significant and heavy situation with your child, trying to take care of your needs, trying to keep a relationship afloat, and then the relationship ends, and then it all kind of comes sort of snap into this moment that you wake up in this car. So that's a lot. That's a lot.
It is. And remember that Wendy was a people pleaser and anxiously attached. So I wasn't taking care of me.
Yeah, you remind us of that. And that was, as you were telling your story, that's one of the things that came up for me was, and where is Wendy in all of this?
It's a fine question. And I still don't really know how to answer it.
Yeah. So you tumbled into this coma. Now you opened the call by acknowledging that, you're okay being on this coma, but kind of as you tell the story, it's like you sort of tumbled into this coma over the course of 18 months and found yourself here. I kind of have this mental image of you coming down this really large mountain of sand and kind of at the very end gliding into this landing, right? With your hair and your clothes all askew, so to speak.
Yeah, that's great imagery right there.
Yeah. and certainly, I mean, not to make light of this, because obviously, I mean, this is a big deal. This is a big deal for you. And
and it was interesting because at the time, I mean, do you remember when we were kids, those sort of inflatable clowns that you could punch and they'd like pop back up again?
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of like, I felt like life just kept punching me and I just kept snapping right back up again and never stayed down. And I had things that probably warranted me staying down for a little while. And I just didn't, because I was wrapped up in my people pleasing and, trying to be successful and trying to be productive and trying to be part of the hustle culture and all the things I had always done. I mean, that wasn't anything different. So 2020 is kind of an anomaly because I really was, I was doing the coach training and I was trying to figure things out, I think is the way to describe that process for me.
I want to come back to what you just said, because I think that's really important that we draw a circle around that and kind of highlight it. You said it was like that punching clown that I kept getting back up again and getting back up again. And so what you're saying is like, our society celebrates resilience, right? Like how many times has somebody said to me, I mean, you always bubble back up, you always recover. And it's like, yeah, but when do you stop falling down so you can recover, right? But what I'm hearing you say is like, what's the point of continuing to get back up if you're just going to take another punch? And I know that flies in the face of some other wisdoms and that sort of thing. But in your context, you're saying it was punch after punch after punch. So at some point you got to stay down. You got to figure out, how can I go about this differently? And that's what brought you to coach training.
Yeah. And the staying down is, part of it is catching your breath, right?
Mm-hmm.
Part of it is like assessing, am I okay? Part of it is, what's my strategy when I get back up? Like there's value in staying down when you've had things come at you and you haven't had adequate time to process them. That's kind of my big word now that I've been in therapy for a while, right? So 2020 was interesting because that was the coach training. And I sort of bought into what we're often told in either professional trainings or when we're getting advanced degrees or whatever it is. And that is this idea that you have to be go, go, go to get out there and get your business and get your customers and get everything figured out. And I struggled with my vision for my coaching business. And I still do, because I'm not clear. I'm not clear on what I want it to look like. I have a sort of sense of how I want things to be. And I made a website, which, you'll have in the notes and all that kind of stuff, but none of it felt quote unquote right. Like I did it because we needed to do it, but it didn't really feel right. And I kind of stayed in that little flux spot for, a year or so. And then in 2021, in May, I don't know what prompted this, but I was in a therapy session with my therapist and I realized all of the therapy I had been doing over the last 30 years, on and off, stop and start, ebb and flow, was all surrounding grief. I was always trying to deal with some level of grief. And I was in my 50s and I had never done any of the work that therapy offers to heal wounds, to figure out who I am, to love myself. Like I hadn't done any of that. So while I'm on this pause I stumbled into, I made an intentional choice. I'm going to do this work.
This is a really important inflection point for you. I can see that. Our listeners can't, but I can see that. What is that distinction there, though? Because I think this will be helpful for people. You said, I've been in therapy on and off for 30 years. I've been working on grief, but I haven't done the work. What's the difference between all those years and now?
So my answer is coming from someone who has just been in therapy. I don't have any training. I don't know what I'm talking about other than my own personal experience.
Yeah, your own experience.
Yeah, but I think because grief for me had always just been sort of associated with being sad and missing somebody or something, missing like grief and when I got divorced and grief when I had miscarriages and like typical things that people understand to be grief. But if we don't do the work of looking inward to see what it is that makes us behave the way that we behave, why we choose the people that we choose. Like if we don't take a look at that, we're doomed to just keep repeating the same behaviors. And then it's that old quote, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And since I had that realization that what I was doing was not working, I needed to do something different. And I didn't really know what it was. But I started just kind of taking a look at, okay, what are the different kinds of therapy that people do? And the one that was really powerful for me, and I'm going to mess up like the specifics of how it's done, and I'm sure it's done differently with everybody, but reparenting. I reparented myself. And the concept is, you have a picture of yourself when you're a child, you put it somewhere prominent in your home, and you talk to that child the way you want it to be spoken to. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. When you were a kid, and what came out of it, one, that was really hard for me to be kind to that little girl. And I'm sure, all the mental health professionals are like, yes, we know exactly what you're talking about, because I think it happens to everybody at some point or another. But it was really sort of earth-shattering for me how hard it was for me to be nice to her. And it led to, kind of a lot of analysis of my relationship with my mother and a lot of analysis of my relationship with my father and all that kind of stuff. But what kind of came out of it for me was, this is what I need to be doing right now. I don't need to be doing the hustle stuff. I don't need to be working on my coaching business. I don't need to be getting workshops fired up. Like, I don't need to be doing that stuff. And the reason why it's not working for me right now is because my heart's not there. Because my heart is figuring out, like, what else do I need to address and heal and look at?
Wendy, just to call attention to, and then I'm going to go into that second question so you can continue with the story. You mentioned earlier that you're that Wendy was a people pleaser, when you were talking about the Wendy from 2017 and before. And then you talk about finding it hard to be kind to little Wendy. I'll call you that. And now you're taking this pause to kind of shift and recenter and allow yourself to think about pleasing you.
Yeah.
Instead of others. I mean, you didn't say it that way, but that's what it seems like. It's like there's this transition, there's this awareness and this shift away from recognizing how much energy you're putting into making other people happy and realizing through grief that it is time to make you happy. Is that a fair reflection of what you're saying?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I don't know that I would limit it to through grief, because I think grief was where I was before, and I think healing is where I am now. And I see those as two different experiences in my body for sure,
Okay.
and two different experiences for me to work through.
Yeah.
But I do think that what resulted for me from doing the work is I am not as much of a people pleaser anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The tendencies are still there. When you and I got on our call to talk about, doing the podcast, one of the things I said to you was I was worried I wouldn't do it right for you and I wouldn't live up to your mission and your intention and all those things. And we had a laugh because I said, there's the people pleaser. There she
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
She's still there. But what's been powerful about it is I realized that you can love yourself and take care of yourself without being selfish. Because my programming was, if you take care of yourself first, you're just selfish. And that's simply not true. It's just not true.
Let me ask the second question. And I think you've really already talked about this, but if there's anything you want to add, and if not, then we'll go to the third question. But you've described this comma that you came, as we've kind of said, you came tumbling into, right? And it was the coach training, it's the reflection, it's the therapy, and it's doing the work, it's the healing, it's the reparenting. What has this created for you?
What a great question. And I even knew it was coming, but it's still a great question because it has created a bunch of things. But I think the umbrella of what it's created is just a mindset shift and a refocus on different things. And the really sort of succinct way to say it is I no longer look outside of myself for approval, for love, for whatever it is. I look inside now. Mm-hmm. And I never did that before. And there are lots of people out there who that's how they were raised and they've always done it that way. God, I envy them that they got to have most of their adult life doing it that way, because the side effect of that is, I'm not as anxious. I don't worry as much. My feelings don't get hurt as easily. My boundaries are better. Like there's just this whole big, beautiful bubble of self-love that has come out of just shifting from outside to inside.
What would you say you've learned about yourself specifically as a result of this experience being on the comma?
Well, it's kind of funny because I think I would have described myself as strong and resilient before, but those words have different meaning to me now. Because I think the strong and resilient before was the clown bouncing back up because that's how he's designed, right? And now it's more intentional. It's more thoughtful. It's, you know what? I am going to be resilient about this piece, but I'm going to let this other piece go. And I am going to be strong about this one thing because it's important to me and because it matters to me. But I'm not going to worry about being strong about this other stuff because I just don't care. And it's really nice to sort of just be in this space where now I look inside for all the things that I need. And it's not perfect. And I still have some really, longstanding bad habits and bad default thoughts and all that stuff. It's not like I took some magic pill and all of a sudden I woke up one day and I'm so great. But there definitely has been a really powerful shift for me.
And in saying that, what I'm hearing from you is that there has been this powerful shift. There are these things that have changed. Life still brings challenges. It's still difficult. You still have these traits and parts of you that maybe, you say aren't perfect or what have you. Because I hear this from so many people and I hear it myself. I'm trying to find like these right words to describe it or some good words to describe it. It's like you change, and it's not so much that problems go away. It's my ability to manage everything that life presents for me softens or eases, or let me stop there and hand it back over to you.
So I think eases is the key word.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everything about my life just feels easier. It doesn't mean it is easier, but I don't feel like I'm carrying around so much heavy stuff. And when you said earlier, like, what did I learn about myself? And I kind of went to the strong and resilient. But now that my brain has been able to think about it for a minute or two, I think the bigger lesson that I learned is like, I know all the answers if I turn inward to find them. So like my inner wisdom, I know how to access it now. It's always been there, right? But I had a really loud critical voice that sort of overshadowed anything that my inner wisdom was trying to tell me. And those roles have reversed now, and the inner critic is much quieter because my inner wisdom is really good at shutting him up. She puts duct tape over his mouth. She blows him up with dynamite. She pushes him off the ledge with a bulldozer.
I want to ask you this question because I think anyone who has spent any time with the inward journey or done any coaching work or therapy work or whatever is curious. How do you know the difference between your inner wisdom and your inner critic?
That's a really good question. The short answer is how it feels. Mm-hmm. Because my inner wisdom feels like safety. It feels like love. It feels kind of warm and fuzzy. It feels relaxed. And my inner critic is just, it's loud and it's overstimulating and it's mean and it's a liar. It's just my inner critic. I used to tell people he looked like Jabba the Hutt in my head. This big, stinky, fat, growly, grumbly thing. And through some of the work that I've been doing, one of the modalities was some hypnotherapy. And through that, he now looks like Ursula the Sea Witch from Little Mermaid, which is softer and quieter.
Yeah.
And much quieter now.
Little bit of a makeover and also something different in that persona as well, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Ursula the Sea Witch still isn't a very nice character, right?
Right.
Manipulating, all that kind of stuff. But it's not as aggressive. It's not as loud. It's not as disruptive. Mm-hmm. And my inner wisdom, she's kind of cheeky. Like she'll before she does something, when I'm paying attention to her, like she does a little wink or she does a little laugh to kind of like, I got you. Watch this. Watch what I got for you.
So question 4 then, you've already shared some answers to this. So elaborate or expand. What has changed or what is changing for you as a result of sitting on this comma?
I'm spending more energy on just figuring out what I like instead of worrying about what other people like or what other people like to do or what I feel like I should do. Like one of the things that makes me laugh is I have always enjoyed going to the opera. That's always been a thing. Now that I've been doing this journey, not so much. Opera's not really my top of the choice. And it's interesting, like, how did I get to the spot where I liked going to opera and what changed for me? I think if I think about what did I like about opera, and it's not that I dislike opera, it's just not, it's not at the top of my list anymore. And I realized, they're just too long. I like that in small doses. I like the beautiful singing, but I don't want a whole 2 hours. It's too long.
Okay.
Which is, it's
interesting. So it begs the question, was it too long before? Were you forcing yourself to sit through 2 hours, or did you enjoy 2 hours before and you just don't enjoy 2 hours now?
I think I was forcing myself to sit through 2 hours, kind of like the pain of beauty, right? Like I don't want to sit in a chair for 2 hours to get my hair done, but if I'm going to have them put foils in, I'm going to sit in the chair for 2 hours.
Well, and what I'm curious about, like, these aren't your words, I'm putting them in here, but seems like the difference now is that Wendy is aware of what Wendy wants, what Wendy likes, and Wendy's able to just say it when it is. So before it was like an opera is 2 hours. I have to sit through 2 hours. Now it's like I enjoy opera for as much as I enjoy opera, and I'll be done when I'm done. Yeah.
And that's spilling over into all kinds of things. I'm finding myself going, you know what? This doesn't really feel good anymore. Like I don't know why I was doing this as often as I was doing whatever it is, And I'm also finding that music is much more impactful on me than it was before. And I think it's because I'm present. I think it's because I'm listening. I think it's because I'm tuning into the different instruments. And I went to a range ensemble Friday night, which is a string quartet, and they played Vivaldi's Four Seasons, and I spent half the time sobbing.
For clarity, yeah, when you say you spent half the time sobbing, what was happening for you while you were sobbing?
I just was very moved by the music. And my thought process at the time was, is it this piece? Is it Vivaldi's Four Seasons specifically that's doing this to me? Is it because it's strings, which evokes a certain feeling for me compared to piano or guitar or whatever it is, right? At the time, I was like, what is triggering this? And then I said to myself, who cares? Who cares? Just enjoy this. And I just settled in to enjoy it.
And you said, like, you're not stuck. You're sitting on this comma by choice. You choose to be here. It's the break. It's the pause. It's the chance to do the work and to lean in and to create these things for yourself. So I'll see how you choose to answer this last question, which is, what does getting off the comma look like for you?
I don't know. I mean, I really don't know, because right now I don't feel like I need to get off of it. And so I'm not really looking at what it might look like to get off of it. Like I had this 5-year plan, and I was going to do this, that, and the other thing. And I sort of scrapped that. I'm like, who cares? Why put time limitations? Because I think in traditional coaching, particularly the kind of coaching that you and I do, which is really focused on performance, right? We're encouraging our clients to put timeframes on things, because it's human nature to not do things if we don't have a deadline. We just keep kicking it down the road. And so it's been interesting to be fully aware that I will probably help myself get off this comma if I set some deadlines and some timeframes, but I just don't want to, which just tells me I don't want to get off the comma right now.
Yes, and that comes through very clearly. And I think it's an important, approach and perspective, right? Especially since you acknowledge the type of coaching that we do, or at least the type of model that we coach to. Because even in coaching with my clients, I sometimes struggle as the coach around, like, oh my gosh, Cammie would be like, you're self-referencing, right? But it's like, what parts of coaching I enjoy. Like, as the coach, what parts do I enjoy? Let's just be honest, right? And I love the digging into the what's going on and what are you thinking, what are you feeling, and that sort of thing. And obviously, with all clients, I work on the accountability piece, the declarations, like what's your next step, what's your action, by when, and so forth. But that part isn't as fun for me because I love the discovery part, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, I don't know where I was going with that, but what you're acknowledging is that piece that is the outcome and the why, right? So somebody might say, okay, when are you getting off the comma? What does getting off the comma look like? Why do you choose to stay there? And you're saying, I don't need to get off the comma right now because the outcomes that I'm looking for are being met where I am.
Yeah.
So I'll interject and say that there is no rule that says you have to get off a comma. There is no expert who's gonna, has the answer that says at some point everybody has to get off the comma. Because what I'm also hearing you say is that for the purposes of our conversation in this podcast, yeah, you're sitting on a comma by choice. And some could argue and say, and what you've done is created a destination for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think much of society programs us to think that we're not allowed to stay on a comma for longer than what somebody else determines is a reasonable amount of time to deal with whatever it is we're dealing with, right?
Which is why so many people struggle with sitting on a comma and being stuck, right? Because all those voices come up of, I'm not supposed to be here, or when am I going to get off this? Or, I mean, I think about some of my own experiences, and then I'll come back and let you finish that thought of, well, crap, I thought I would be off the comma by now. Or, it's months later and it's like, geez, I didn't think it was going to take months. And then you find yourself there again and you're like, I didn't know this was going to take years, or I didn't know I was going to end up here again for the fourth or fifth time. But it's always a measure of comparison. It's a measure of comparison to my own expectation or what I believe other people's expectations are, right?
And I think the other thing that's been, I mean, I guess surprising is the best word, because, my day job is a lawyer and I'm a litigator, and that is very deadline driven, right? There is a by when for just about everything that we do. And over the years, I've learned that I need to have a deadline in order to get that work done. But here I am in my personal life when I'm not wearing my lawyer hat and I'm intentionally not putting deadlines on myself. Like, why is that? What is it about the deadlines that has made me not ever be on a comma, right? I've just been, what's the next deadline? What's the next deadline? What's the next deadline? And I'm just finding myself in this space like, I don't care what the next deadline is. I'm just here.
I think it reinforces something for all of us to consider, because it would be easy for me to say it's something as if it was a fact, but it's like, this production driven capitalist forward momentum, always growing approach doesn't fit in all parts of life, right? What I'm hearing you say is that when I'm in my work role, deadlines work for me. I'm good at them, and it keeps me moving and it keeps me moving forward. And here I am curious about why that's not necessarily applying in my personal life. Well,
yeah,
maybe it doesn't belong here.
But I think I always lived that way, both inside and outside of my lawyer hat, right? And now I'm just realizing I don't want to do that. And the byproduct is everything about my personal life when I'm not working is slower, is calmer, is quieter, but it doesn't feel smaller. It actually feels bigger. Yeah, it feels open and expansive to just be quiet and to just be slow and to take my time and be, and it's interesting because it's not take my time like I have to overthink every decision before I make it, because that's not how I make decisions. I typically make them very quickly and I move along. And if it's not the right decision, I make another one. I course correct, and who cares? I don't fret about that kind of stuff. But I'm just kind of surprised that I kind of got off of the train, right? I just kind of got off the train and I'm not getting back on anytime soon. And it's okay.
Yeah. And I can see it in your face. I can hear it in your voice. And like, that's a really good place to kind of to wrap. And I think that's a really powerful point. I can hear how profound this is for you. What would you acknowledge yourself for right now?
It's a hard one. It's always hard for me to do that. I think just being honest with myself and honest with others that I need to do things differently than how I've always done them, and how they may expect me to be and how I may expect me to be. Because I hit a point where whatever I was doing for 40 years just wasn't working anymore. And so I'm proud of myself for finally getting off the train.
Yeah. Thank you, Wendy. This is I'm always honored to be part of the story, and I always take things away. This is the selfish little benefit that I get out of doing this work, is that I get to be in the front row, middle seat, and I take something away every single time. Let's do acknowledgments in general. So how can people find you if you would like them to? Where can people find you?
So if you want my sort of professional goings on, I am on LinkedIn. My personal playing around, explorer, adventurer, which is basically food, travel, weird roadside attractions, is at My Blissed Life on Instagram. Those are my two main places, I would say. My website is daringanddynamiccoaching.com. And if you're feeling so inclined to find organizations that need your help and support, I've chosen a couple here locally. Food banks are always good. Gender health centers are always good. And organizations that are helping people get out of trafficking. So those are kind of the three. So the three I've chosen are the River City Food Bank, which is a local food bank here in Sacramento, and the Gender Health Center, which provides support and resources for trans and queer youth and adults. And I've chosen Weave, which is a women's shelter, and they do a lot of work. Trafficking is a problem in Sacramento in particular compared to other parts of the country. So those are my three favorite sort of pet projects, and the links to those organizations that I support are going to be in the notes. But, if you're looking for something, those are good things to think about in terms of trying to really make an impact and really change the world.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. And those specific links and references will be in the show notes. And the reason I invite my guests to include that is, it gives an opportunity to give voice and additional kind of boost and support to small organizations or organizations that might not otherwise get the press. But equally, it's a reflection, a little bit more of a reflection of who you are, right?
Yeah.
And what you support and what's important to you. So folks can certainly look at these organizations and support them, or find comparable organizations, in their own communities or the ones that matter to them. It's really more about, this is part of your story. So Wendy, thank you. I appreciate you being with me today and sharing your story. It was such an honor and a privilege. Thank you again for just your openness.
Well, thanks so much for having me and giving me an opportunity to sort of unpack some of this out loud with other people, right? Because the thoughts have been swirling around, but I don't say them out loud very often. So it's really nice to be able to sort of share that.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely. The power of getting it out of your head, right? And I close every episode with an invitation for folks to journal. So, people will have the opportunity to sit down and kind of write about what you shared. So thank you again. And we'll close this out.
All right. Thanks.
What an honor it is to witness these stories from these amazing human beings, and today's guest was no exception. I invite you to think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. I can't tell you how magical it can be to set aside your expectations and just let your thoughts flow out of your head and onto paper. You don't have to have an agenda. You don't have to do anything with it, but you can be amazed at what comes out of your thoughts and onto paper and what that can do for you. I know freestyle journaling has been a powerful practice in my life for a very long time. You just never know what you might discover about yourself. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. Follow me on social media at Off the Comma, and also look for upcoming workshops and events at offthecomma.com, or better yet, go to offthecomma.com and sign up for my mailing list and let me bring the news directly to you. I am passionate about keeping this podcast ad-free so that we create a safe container for people to be able to tell their stories uninterrupted by commercials and promotions. I currently cover all the production costs, and I'm happy to continue doing so. And I'm also open to and appreciative of any donations that anyone would like to contribute. This is nothing more than to be able to support the podcast and cover some of the monthly editing and producing and equipment costs that are associated with this podcast. So look for the donations link in the podcast descriptions wherever you find this podcast. Be sure to like this episode, follow the podcast, and more importantly, spread the good word. If you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. As always, keep noticing.